I never thought I'd become that woman, the kind who stays with a man who treats her like an ornamental vase. But there I was, Mrs. Damien Cross, wife of the tech billionaire who revolutionized cloud computing, sitting in our 15,000-square-foot penthouse overlooking Manhattan, feeling smaller than the dust particles floating through the afternoon light. Vivian, did you remember to call the caterer for Thursday's investor dinner? Damien didn't look up from his tablet as he spoke. He never looked up anymore. Yes, darling. Everything's arranged. My voice came out sweet, practiced, empty. Good. Where the Valentino? The red one. Henderson's wife will probably show up in something pedestrian, and I need you to look the part. He finally glanced at me, but his eyes held the same warmth they'd give a well-trained poodle. You're very good at that, at least. At least. Those two words ignited something that had been smoldering for months, maybe years. I was 28 years old, a former art gallery curator with a master's degree from Columbia, and I'd reduced myself to this, a decorative element in Damien Cross's perfectly curated life. We'd met 5 years ago at a charity auction. He'd been charming then, attentive, seemingly fascinated by my knowledge of contemporary art. He'd courted me with private jet trips to Paris, handwritten notes tucked into bouquets of peonies, whispered promises about partnership and respect. I'd fallen for the fantasy of who he pretended to be. The real Damien emerged slowly after our wedding. First, he suggested I quit my job. You don't need to work anymore, darling. Focus on being happy. Then came the subtle criticisms about my friends being too ordinary for our new social circle. Before I knew it, I'd become isolated, financially dependent, and utterly powerless in a marriage that looked perfect from the outside. That evening, I attended another charity gala on Damien's arm, smiling until my face ached. I watched him glad-hand politicians and tech moguls, his hand possessively on my lower back, showing me off like a new Tesla model. When socialite Patricia Vandermeer complimented my dress, Damien actually said, "Yes, I have excellent taste," as if I were something he'd purchased, not a person who'd chosen her own outfit. In the limousine ride home, something inside me snapped. "Do you even see me anymore?" I asked quietly. Damien was checking his phone as always. "What? Do you see me? Vivian, your wife. Or am I just another asset to you?" He sighed, the sound dripping with condescension. "Jesus, Viv, what brought this on? Did Patricia say something? Because if this is about her commenting on your age, this isn't about Patricia." My voice rose, echoing in the leather interior. "This is about you treating me like I'm a thing you own. Like I have no thoughts, no feelings, no value beyond how I look on your arm." Damien's jaw tightened. "I've given you everything. A lifestyle most women would kill for. Security, status. What more do you want? I want a husband who respects me, who sees me as an equal partner." He laughed. Actually laughed. A cold, dismissive sound. "An equal partner? Vivian, I built a $5 billion company from nothing. What exactly have you built? What do you contribute beyond looking beautiful and remembering which fork to use?" The words hit like physical blows. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not for him. That night, lying in our king-sized bed with an ocean of expensive sheets between us, I made a decision. Damien thought he held all the power in our marriage because he held all the money. He treated me like I was beneath him, like I existed only to serve his needs and ego. I was going to teach him a lesson about power, control, and humiliation. I was going to show him what it felt like to be vulnerable, to be the one without power, to be dominated by someone he'd underestimated. I had no idea that my lesson would destroy everything, and that Damien Cross was far more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. I spent 3 weeks planning. 3 weeks watching Damien continue his patronizing routine, acting like I was a well-maintained appliance rather than a human being. Every dismissive comment, every time he interrupted me in conversation, every moment he treated me like expensive decoration, it all fed the fury building inside me. I did my research carefully. I read articles, watched videos, joined anonymous online forums. I learned about power dynamics, about psychological dominance, about the kind of reversal I was planning. This wasn't about physical intimacy. It was about showing Damien what it felt like to be the powerless one, even for just a moment. On a Friday night, I prepared everything meticulously. Damien came home from work around 9, loosening his tie as he walked through the door. He barely acknowledged me, heading straight for his study. "Damien," I called out, my voice carrying a tone he hadn't heard in years. Confident, commanding. "We need to talk." He turned, surprised. "Can it wait? I have the Tokyo merger documents to review." "No, it can't." I stood in the hallway wearing the designer lingerie he'd bought me last Christmas. Something expensive he'd chosen without asking what I liked, as usual. But tonight I was reclaiming it on my terms. His eyes widened slightly. We hadn't been intimate in nearly 2 months. "Vivian. Bedroom. Now." I didn't ask. I commanded. Something flickered across his face. Confusion, curiosity, maybe even arousal. He followed me upstairs, probably assuming I'd finally accepted my role as the dutiful wife catering to his needs. He had no idea. What happened in that bedroom over the next 2 hours was a complete reversal of every power dynamic in our marriage. I'd set the stage carefully, restraints attached to our bed frame, supplies I'd researched and purchased discreetly. When I revealed my intentions, Damien initially laughed, thinking it was some kind of game. He stopped laughing when he realized I was serious. "Vivian, what the hell is this?" He tried to maintain his authoritative tone, but I heard the uncertainty underneath. "This is you learning what it feels like to be powerless," I said calmly. "To be at someone else's mercy. To be treated like you exist only for someone else's purposes. This is insane." "I'm not. You are," I interrupted. "Because for once in our marriage, I'm in control. You're going to feel what I've felt every single day since we got married. You're going to understand what it's like to be dominated, dismissed, and treated like you don't matter." I saw fear flash in his eyes then, genuine fear, and I felt a savage satisfaction. Finally, he understood. Finally, the great Damien Cross knew what vulnerability felt like. I went through with it. Every moment was calculated to strip away his arrogance, his certainty, his belief in his own dominance. I spoke to him the way he spoke to me, condescending, dismissive, reducing him to nothing but a body for my use. But somewhere in the middle of it all, something changed. I saw tears in his eyes, not arousal or surrender, but genuine pain, humiliation. And in that moment, I realized I'd become exactly what I hated about him. Someone wielding power without empathy, someone treating another human being as less than. When it was over, Damien lay silent. I removed the restraints, suddenly feeling sick to my stomach. What had I done? "Damien, He got up without looking at me, grabbed his clothes, and walked out of the bedroom. I heard the guest room door slam. I sat on the bed, shaking. I'd wanted to teach him a lesson about power and respect, but I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I'd humiliated him the way he'd humiliated me, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like ashes in my mouth. The next morning, I woke to silence. Damien's side of the bed was untouched. I found him in his study, fully dressed in a suit, his face a mask of cold composure. "Damien, we need to talk about last night. I was angry, and I went too far." He held up a hand, stopping me mid-sentence. "Save it, Vivian." His voice was ice. "My attorney will be contacting you this afternoon. I'm filing for divorce." My heart stopped. "What? You wanted to teach me a lesson about power?" He smiled, but it was the cruelest expression I'd ever seen on his face. "Consider the lesson learned. Now you're going to learn one of your own." He walked past me toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Vivian? Everything that happened last night? I recorded it. Every single moment. You might want to call your own attorney. You're going to need one." The door closed behind him, and my world collapsed. I stood frozen in Damien's study for what felt like hours after he left. Recorded. He'd recorded everything. The humiliation, the reversal of power, every word I'd said, every action I'd taken. My stomach turned as I imagined those recordings in the wrong hands, or worse, as evidence in a divorce proceeding. By noon, 3 things had happened. Damien had moved out to his corporate apartment in Midtown. A process server had delivered divorce papers to our penthouse, and my face was all over page 6. Tech Titan's marriage meltdown. Damien Cross files for divorce amid shocking allegations, the headline screamed. The article was vague but deliberately suggestive, hinting at inappropriate behavior and psychological abuse by yours truly. They'd somehow gotten a photo of me from last night, dressed in that lingerie, looking predatory rather than powerful. The optics were devastating. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. My mother, my former college roommate, distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to know what happened, but I couldn't tell anyone the truth. How could I explain what I'd done without sounding unhinged? I called the attorney whose card Damien's lawyer had included with the divorce papers, a courtesy, apparently, suggesting I seek immediate legal representation. The attorney, Marcus Chun, agreed to see me that afternoon. His office in Tribeca was understated but expensive, all clean lines and leather chairs. Marcus himself was mid-40s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of face that gave nothing away. "Mrs. Cross," he began, after I'd sat down across from his massive desk. "I'm going to be direct with you. Your husband's legal team contacted me this morning. Professional courtesy, letting me know what you're up against. This is bad." "How bad?" He opened a folder on his desk. "Mr. Cross is alleging emotional and psychological abuse, sexual coercion, and marital rape. He has video evidence of the incident in question. He's also claiming you've exhibited increasingly unstable behavior over the past year, which he's prepared to substantiate with testimony from household staff, friends, and business associates. Marital rape." The words hung in the air like poison. "That's not. I didn't." "Did you restrain your husband against his will and engage in sexual acts he didn't consent to?" Marcus's voice was clinical, professional. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Had Damien consented? He'd followed me upstairs. He'd initially seemed intrigued, but when he'd tried to say no, I'd insisted. I told him he didn't have a choice. In my anger and hurt, I'd done exactly what I'd accused him of. I'd treated him like he didn't have agency over his own body. I started, my voice breaking. He spent 5 years treating me like property, dismissing me, belittling me. I just wanted him to understand what that felt like. Marcus nodded slowly. "I believe you, but understanding your motivations doesn't change what happened. And right now, Mr. Cross holds every card. He has the evidence. He has the money to finance an unlimited legal battle. He has the public relations team already spinning this narrative in his favor. What do you have, Mrs. Cross?" The question landed like a punch. What did I have? No income of my own. No career I'd maintained during our marriage. Friends who'd drifted away or been deliberately excluded from my life. A prenuptial agreement I'd signed when I was young and in love, barely reading the clauses that protected all of Damien's assets. "Nothing," I whispered. "I have nothing." "Then we need to move quickly," Marcus said, "because Mr. Cross isn't just divorcing you, he's destroying you." Over the next week, I learned just how thorough Damien's destruction could be. My credit cards were canceled. My access to our joint accounts was frozen pending the divorce proceedings. The penthouse belonged to Damien's company, so I was effectively living there at his mercy. My car, leased through his corporation, was repoed from our parking garage. But the financial assault was nothing compared to the character assassination. Articles appeared in the Times, the Post, even the Atlantic, all carefully worded to avoid libel, but devastating nonetheless. The dark side of trophy wife culture, when desperation turns dangerous. Tech Billionaire speaks out about marital abuse, why male victims stay silent. Each piece painted me as an unstable, vindictive woman who'd married for money and turned violent when threatened with divorce. Damien gave one interview, just 1 to 60 minutes. He sat there looking vulnerable and honest, describing years of walking on eggshells around his increasingly volatile wife. He spoke about emotional manipulation, about feeling trapped, about finally finding the courage to leave. He cried actual tears when the interviewer asked why he'd stayed so long. "I loved her," he said simply. "I kept thinking the woman I married was still in there somewhere. I was wrong." Watching that interview from the penthouse, which I'd now learned Damien could legally evict me from any time he chose, I finally understood the full scope of my mistake. I hadn't just crossed a line. I'd given Damien everything he needed to crucify me publicly while playing the sympathetic victim. My mother called after the interview aired. "Vivian, sweetheart, what's happening? The things they're saying about you, tell me none of it's true." Couldn't, because some of it was true. I had done what they said I did, even if their interpretation stripped away all context, all my own suffering, all the years of emotional neglect that had led to that moment. "Mom, it's complicated. Did you hurt him?" Her voice was small, almost frightened. "Did you do what they're saying?" Silence stretched between us. Finally, I whispered, "I made a terrible mistake." She was crying when she hung up. That night, I sat alone in the cavernous penthouse, looking out at the Manhattan skyline I'd once found so beautiful. Damien had taught me his lesson perfectly. He'd shown me what real power looked like. Not the crude physical domination I'd attempted, but the systematic destruction of someone's entire life using money, influence, and public opinion. But as I sat there in the darkness, something else occurred to me. Damien's response had been too swift, too perfect, too coordinated. The PR campaign, the frozen accounts, the media blitz, all of it had rolled out with military precision within days of our confrontation. Which meant one of two things. Either Damien was an absolute genius who'd orchestrated this entire counterattack in less than a week, or he'd been planning it long before that night in our bedroom. The thought sent ice through my veins. Had I walked into a trap? Had Damien been waiting for me to do something? Anything he could use against me? I opened my laptop and started searching for Marcus Chen again. But this time looking deeper. What I found made my blood run cold. Marcus Chen had served as outside counsel for Cross Technologies 3 years ago. The connection wasn't hidden exactly, but it wasn't advertised either. The attorney Damien's lawyers had courteously recommended was actually someone who'd worked for my husband. I'd been set up from the very beginning, and now I was truly alone, truly powerless, and completely at Damien Cross's mercy. But I wasn't quite defeated yet. I fired Marcus Chen the next morning via email and hired someone Damien's team would never anticipate. A small-time family law attorney named Rosa Delgado who operated out of a cramped office in Queens. Rosa had a 4.8 rating on Google reviews from divorced women praising her tenacity, and more importantly, she had no connections to Manhattan's elite legal circles. "You're getting screwed," Rosa said bluntly during our first meeting, after I'd explained everything. "But here's what doesn't make sense to me. Why would a man like Damien Cross need to record that night? Why would he be prepared with cameras unless he knew something was coming?" "That's what I thought too," I said, feeling validated for the first time in weeks. It was too perfect, too coordinated. Rosa leaned back in her chair. "Tell me about the months before that night. Did anything unusual happen? Changes in his behavior? Questions he asked?" I thought back, trying to remember details through the fog of anger and humiliation that had colored those final months. He kept suggesting marriage counseling. I thought he was being patronizing, another way to make me feel like I was the problem. But now it looks like he was creating a paper trail, Rosa finished. "Did you go?" "Once." The therapist asked a lot of questions about my anger, whether I'd ever fantasized about violence. I walked out. I felt ambushed. I paused. Damien stayed and talked to her for another 30 minutes. Rosa made notes. "We need to find that therapist. And we need to look at your husband's finances. In my experience, when powerful men go scorched earth on their wives this quickly, they're hiding something. The best defense is a good offense, and your husband went nuclear." "Why?" Over the next 3 weeks, Rosa dug while I lived like a ghost in the penthouse. Damien's lawyers had agreed I could stay through the end of the month. A generous gesture that the press ate up. Poor Damien, still providing for his abusive wife even after everything she'd done. I used the time to access everything I could. Old bank statements Damien had left in his study. Passwords I'd watched him type over the years. Email accounts he thought I didn't know about. I wasn't trying to be vindictive, I was trying to survive. What I found, buried in encrypted files and offshore account statements, was staggering. Damien had been siphoning money from Cross Technologies for at least 3 years. Millions of dollars funneled through shell companies in the Caymans, Luxembourg, Singapore. The paper trail was complex, deliberately obscured, but once I started pulling threads, the whole ugly tapestry revealed itself. He was laundering money, embezzling from his own company, defrauding investors and shareholders. And based on the timestamps of some of these transactions, he'd accelerated the theft dramatically in the 6 months before our confrontation. He knew, I told Rosa, spreading printouts across her desk. He knew he was about to get caught. He needed a scandal to distract from the financial investigation that was probably coming. He needed a villain. Rosa's eyes widened as she scanned the documents. Vivian, if this is real, if you can prove this, you don't just have leverage for the divorce. You have enough to destroy him. But proving it wouldn't be easy. The documents I'd found were illegally obtained. I'd accessed his private files without permission. Anything I took to the SEC or the FBI would be inadmissible, and I'd likely face charges myself for hacking and theft. We need someone inside, Rosa said. Someone who works for Cross Technologies and can access these files legitimately. I thought about Damien's staff, his employees, the hundreds of people who worked for him. Who would betray Damien Cross, one of the most powerful men in tech? Then I remembered someone. Jennifer Park, Damien's executive assistant for the past 7 years. Jennifer, who'd always been kind to me at company functions. Jennifer, who'd looked uncomfortable during Damien's 60 Minutes interview. Jennifer, who'd sent me a short text after the divorce announcement that simply said, "I'm sorry for what you're going through." It was a slim chance, but it was the only one I had. I reached out to Jennifer through a burner phone, suggesting coffee at a quiet place in Brooklyn, far from anywhere Damien's people might see us. To my surprise, she agreed. Jennifer showed up looking tired and anxious, constantly checking over her shoulder. We ordered coffee and sat in the back corner of a nearly empty cafe. "I shouldn't be here," she said immediately. "If Damien finds out." "Jennifer, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. In the months before the divorce, did you notice anything unusual about Damien's behavior? Meetings with lawyers? Unusual financial transactions?" She bit her lip, clearly wrestling with something. Finally, she spoke. "I've worked for Damien for 7 years. I've been loyal. I've kept his secrets, managed his schedule, covered for him. But what he's doing to you..." She shook her head. "I have kids, Vivian. I have a daughter. And watching him destroy you on national television while knowing the truth. I can't sleep at night." My heart raced. Knowing what truth? "He planned it," Jennifer said quietly. "Not the specifics of what happened that night, but the divorce, the media strategy, all of it. He's been working with his PR team for 8 months. He told me he needed to manage the narrative around the divorce before it happened. He said you'd probably do something crazy when he left you, and he needed to be prepared. He set me up. Worse than that, he engineered it. He was deliberately cruel to you in those final months. I heard him on the phone with his therapist. Yes, he was seeing someone too, strategizing about how to push you to your breaking point. He wanted you to do something he could use against you." The coffee in my stomach turned to acid. Every dismissive comment, every public humiliation, every moment of deliberate neglect. It had all been calculated. Damien hadn't just been a bad husband. He'd been actively trying to provoke me into giving him ammunition for the divorce. "Why?" I whispered. "Why go to such lengths?" Jennifer's face darkened. "Because of the money. I do his books, Vivian. I know about the offshore accounts. I know about the embezzlement. There's a forensic audit coming. The board authorized it 2 months ago after some irregularities showed up. Damien needed a massive distraction, and he needed to make sure if the truth came out, everyone would be too focused on hating you to care about his crimes." She pulled out a flash drive. "This has copies of everything. The real books, the communications with his PR team, emails showing he knew about the audit. Everything you need. I stared at the small device like it was a live grenade. Jennifer, if you give this to me, he'll know it came from you. I know. Her voice was steady. I've already accepted that. I've got another job lined up, and I've documented everything he's ever asked me to do that was legally questionable. If he comes after me, I'll take him down with me. But you need this more than I do. You need to survive this. I took the flash drive with shaking hands. Thank you. I don't know how to. Don't thank me yet, Jennifer interrupted. Damian Cross is the most vindictive man I've ever met. When he finds out you have this, he won't just fight you legally. He'll try to destroy you completely. You need to be ready for that. She left first, disappearing into the Brooklyn afternoon. I sat alone with the flash drive, knowing I was holding either my salvation or my death warrant. It was time to stop being the victim in Damian's carefully constructed narrative. It was time to fight back. I didn't go to the police. I didn't go to the SEC. I did something Damian would never expect from his decorative trophy wife. I went to the investigative journalist who'd been digging into tech industry corruption for the past decade. Miranda Chun, no relation to my former lawyer, had written exposés on everyone from Silicon Valley sexual harassers to crypto scammers. She was known for being meticulous, fearless, and impossible to buy off. If anyone could take down Damian Cross, it was her. We met at her apartment in the East Village. I handed her the flash drive and spent 4 hours walking her through everything. Not just the financial crimes, but the psychological warfare Damian had waged against me. I'm not innocent, I told her honestly. What I did to him that night was wrong. I crossed a line and I'll have to live with that. But he engineered the entire situation. He deliberately pushed me to break so he could use it against me. Miranda studied me for a long moment. If I publish this, it won't make what you did go away. You'll still be the woman who assaulted her husband. Some people will always see you as the villain. I know, I said quietly, but at least the truth will be out there. People will know Damian isn't the victim he's pretending to be. Give me 2 weeks, Miranda said. I need to verify every document, confirm every source. This needs to be airtight. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I moved out of the penthouse and into a modest apartment in Astoria using what little money I had left. I avoided social media, avoided the news, avoided anything that would remind me of the woman the world thought I was. Rosa worked on the divorce case, using the information from Jennifer's flash drive to build a strategy. We couldn't use the illegally obtained evidence in court, but we could use it to pressure Damian into a fair settlement once it became public knowledge. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning in The Atlantic. The headline read, "The Architect of His Own Victimhood: How Damian Cross Engineered a Scandal to Hide Massive Fraud." Miranda had done her homework. The piece was devastating. 15,000 words documenting every offshore account, every falsified record, every email showing Damian had known about the coming audit and had deliberately created a personal scandal to overshadow the financial one. She'd interviewed Jennifer Park, who'd agreed to go on the record, several other Cross Technologies employees who'd witnessed irregularities, and even the therapist Damian had consulted about managing me. The article also addressed our confrontation directly. Miranda didn't excuse my actions, but she provided context. The years of emotional abuse, the deliberate provocation, the recordings Damian had prepared before anything even happened. She framed it not as a story of victim and abuser, but as a story of two people who destroyed each other, with one being wealthy and powerful enough to control the narrative. The response was explosive. Within hours, the SEC opened a formal investigation. The FBI followed. Cross Technologies board suspended Damian pending an internal audit. His carefully constructed image as the sympathetic victim crumbled as journalists dug deeper into his history, finding other women who'd experienced his manipulation, former business partners he'd betrayed, a pattern of using people and discarding them. My phone started ringing off the hook. Not with condemnation this time, but with interview requests, messages of support, apologies from people who'd believed Damian's lies. Even my mother called, crying and apologizing for doubting me. But Damian wasn't done fighting. 3 days after the article published, he released the full video of our confrontation. No context, no explanation, just raw footage designed to shock and horrify. It was his final move, his last attempt to make me the monster. The video did shock people. But in the wake of Miranda's exposé, the response wasn't what Damien had expected. Instead of universal condemnation, there was a more nuanced conversation. About power dynamics in marriage. About what drives people to desperate acts. About how abuse isn't always physical, and how abusers often position themselves as victims. I gave one interview, just one, to the same 60 Minutes correspondent who'd interviewed Damien. I sat in the same chair, looked into the same camera, and told my truth. What I did was wrong, I said clearly. I'm not asking anyone to excuse it or justify it. I violated my husband's consent and dignity, and I'll carry that shame for the rest of my life. But I want people to understand that I didn't wake up one day and decide to hurt someone. I was systematically broken down, deliberately provoked, and pushed to a breaking point by someone who was calculating enough to record it when I finally snapped. Do you think your husband is a victim? The interviewer asked. I thought carefully about my answer. I think we both victimized each other in different ways. He used emotional abuse and financial control. I used physical humiliation. Both are wrong. But only one of us had the power to destroy the other's entire life. And he's been using that power ever since. What do you want now? I want my life back, I said simply. Not the penthouse or the parties or the lifestyle. Just my dignity, my reputation, and enough money to start over. That's all I've ever wanted. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Rosa negotiated a settlement that gave me $15 million. A fraction of Damien's wealth, but enough to rebuild. The prenup was challenged successfully based on evidence that Damien had hidden assets when we'd signed it. He was too busy defending himself against federal charges to fight very hard. Damien Cross was eventually convicted of wire fraud, money laundering, and securities fraud. He served 4 years in a minimum security federal prison. Cross Technologies continued without him, and his shares were liquidated to pay fines and victim restitution. As for me, I moved to Portland and opened a small art gallery. I started therapy to process everything that had happened, both what was done to me and what I'd done. I dated occasionally, but I wasn't in any hurry to trust someone again. 2 years after the divorce, I received a letter. It was from Damien, forwarded through Rosa's office. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. Vivian, it began. I don't expect your forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. But I need you to know that you were right. I didn't see you as a person. I saw you as a possession, something to be managed and controlled. What you did to me that night wasn't right, but it did make me understand what powerlessness feels like. In some twisted way, you taught me the lesson I needed to learn. I just wish we hadn't destroyed each other to get there. I hope you found peace. I'm still looking for mine. D. I read the letter 3 times, then filed it away. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was something. An acknowledgement that we'd both been broken people who'd broken each other further. Some nights, I still think about that moment in our bedroom. The look in Damien's eyes when he realized what I intended. I think about the choice I made and the price we both paid. I wonder what would have happened if I'd chosen differently, if I'd simply left instead of trying to teach him a lesson. But I also think about the woman I was before, trapped, powerless, invisible. And I look at the woman I am now, scarred but free, damaged but surviving. The cost was astronomical, but I reclaimed something essential. My sense of self, my agency, my voice. I don't regret exposing Damien's crimes. I don't regret fighting back when he tried to destroy me. But I do regret the method I chose, the violation, the cruelty, the way I became what I hated most about him. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But the truth is, revenge burns everyone it touches. Damien and I learned that lesson together, in the most painful way possible. Now we both live with the consequences, and with the knowledge that in our war for power and control, we both lost everything that actually mattered.